Hello students, welcome to our video lecture. Basically today we are going to study about articulations or joints. Now we are going to discuss in detail about the synovial joint. So basically what are the structures that is comprising the synovial joints? It is containing 7 components. It will contain the articular cartilage, which is basically a hyaline cartilage in itself. Next is joint cavity will be present, which is because it is the integral component which is going to be formed, and the space provided by this cavity is being filled with the lubricating fluid, which is also known as synovial fluid. Third thing, fibrous capsule should always be there. That is, the fibrous connective tissues lined with the smooth synovial membrane is there, which is basically attaching that synovial membrane with the bones together. Fourth component of the synovial joint is the reinforcing ligament. It can be inside or outside the joint capsule. Fifth component which is present within the synovial joint is synovial fluid, which is a thick, viscous and lubricating fluid which is going to provide or reduce the friction within the two bones. Sixth component of the synovial joint is tendon sheath. It is an elongated bursa that wraps around the tendon subject to friction. Seventh component is menisci, that is formed by the cartilaginous disc in itself. So these are the 7 components which is forming the synovial joints to happen. This is the basic structure. This diagram is representing the basic structure of a synovial joint in itself. Basically in this, as we can see, there are 2 bones are there which is being filled by a synovial cavity is there. Apart from that, synovial membrane and fibrous capsules are there, and the cavity which is being filled by the synovial fluid in itself, as well as the 2 bones are together and ligaments are there, which is basically attaching the 2 bones together so that the movement of that particular bones or the separation of the particular bones can be made together. One of the examples of synovial joint is the knee joint. Now we are going to discuss about the types of synovial joint. There are 6 types of synovial joint are there. They are hinge joint, ball and socket joint, pivot joint, saddle joint, gliding joint and condylar joint. Now we are going to discuss each one in a brief detail from the next slide onwards. First, we are going to talk about hinge joint. Basically, the hinge joint is a type of joint where movement is like 2 boards which are joined together by a hinge. For example, as we can see in a door, there are 2 kind of panels are there. One is straight and other is a door is there which is joined by a hinge. So the movement is possible only in one direction. It may be either forward or backward. So the examples of hinge joint which is present in our body are elbows, knees, fingers and so on, where those kind of joints where only the movement is possible in one direction. It may be either forward or backward. So those types of joints is known as hinge joint. Next type of synovial joint is ball and socket joint. These are those types of joints when a ball shaped end of a one bone fit into a cup shaped socket of another. So basically it is like that one cup is there, in that one ball shaped bone is fitting inside, and it is so the arrangement in such way, that's why the joint is being formed. In these types of joints, bone can move in many directions. So it is not unidirectional, it is multi-directional type of joint. The examples of ball and socket joint are the joints present in the shoulder or the hip region. So basically, as we can see or we can find out, if we are trying to move the shoulder or the hand, due to the presence of joint in the shoulder, that can be moved into multi-directional. Either it may be moved up or down, forward or backward, or we can rotate also. The next type of synovial joint is pivot joint. Basically, these are the joints which allows for rotation around the length of a bone. Basically, in these type of joints, the bones are arranged in such a way that one bone is straight and it is providing the area or the surface through on which the other bones can rotate. So it will allow only for the rotation of the bones over that joints. Example, the joints which is present on the head, in which we can see or we can rotate the head side by side or forward or backward, or as well as rotation, the vertebral column is still and the skull is situated over that, so that it is providing the rotatory motion of that particular structure is possible. And the other example for these types of joint is the forearm joints. Basically, the radius and ulna, they are attached to the palms, that is the metacarpals, through the presence of carpal bones, so that rotation of the wrist position or the palm is possible. Next type of synovial joint is saddle joint. Basically, these types of joints are formed when the surface of both articulation bones are in saddle shape. Basically, one surface of the bones or the joints will be concave in nature and other will be convex. So it is forming that when the joint is being formed, it can be perceived that it is a saddle shape in structure, so that like how the person is riding a horse, they are sitting on a saddle. Same way, these types of joint will be saddle shape. These types of joints will provide wide range of motion. Like the motion can be possible in any direction, that either it may be moved up and down, or rotatory motion is also possible, how much it can be perceived. The best example for these types of saddle joint is the thumb, the joint of the thumb in itself. Next type of synovial joint is gliding joint. Basically, these are the types of joints where the interaction of flat surfaces of the articulating bones are taking place. Like two flat surfaces of the two different bones are articulating together and forming a joint. In these types of joint, the movement is limited, but the movement is the complex type of movement is possible. It is not like that movement is not possible. The movement is possible, or it is a kind of freely movable joint, but the complex movement is possible with limited amount of interaction with each surfaces in itself. The best example of these gliding joints are the joints present in the wrist or ankle, where more than one bones are combining together, like it is a compound joint is there. It is not a simple joint, but the compound joint is there. Next or last type of synovial joint is condylar joint. In these types of joint, the oval shaped articular surface of one bone fits into the oval shaped depression of another. It can be also known as ellipsoid joint. So basically, in these types of joint, the bones or the ending surface of the bones will be oval shaped, where and other bones will be oval in shape, but it will be depressed. So one is elevated and other will be depressed surface, and both are joining together and forming the joints. The best example of these condylar joints are mandibles as well as knuckles. So in these types of joint, what is happening, in one bone end of the bone, it will be round shape, that is oval articular shape, which will be slightly round in nature. Other will be forming the articular surface which will be depressed in nature, of the same oval structure will be there. This is the diagrammatic representation of each of the types of synovial joint. As we can see, whatever we have discussed, like this is the example of elbow or the knee joint. They are the types of hinge joint where the humerus is getting attached to the radius and ulna together, so that the movement is possible only in one direction. Either the elbow arms can fold or it may elongate, or we can open the arms. Same way the joint, knee joint, is the modified types of hinge joint is there, because the presence of, instead of the three bones, one more bone, that is the patella, is also there, which is providing the kneecap. So the knee joint is a kind of modified hinge joint. Next is condylar joint. So basically in this, the radiocarpal joint of the wrist is a type of condylar joint is there. The radius and ulna are providing the flat surface over which the flat surfaces of the, they are providing the concave surfaces or the depressed surfaces, and the oval surfaces of the carpals are getting attached, or they are forming the joints in itself. Next is picture is representing the saddle joint, in which we can see the carpal is forming a saddle shape, like one is the concave extremity is formed and other is forming the convex extremities, and both are joining together and forming the saddle in shape. Next type is the pivot joint. Basically it is the proximal radio-ulnar joint, which is the anterior view is there. Like this is the type of pivot joint which will only allows for rotation along that surface. Next is gliding joint. They are the joints of the within the carpal, that is the intercarpal joints of the wrist is of gliding joint, in which the two flat surfaces are articulating together so that complex movement is possible. And the example of ball and socket joint is the joint which is present in the hip region. Basically the pubic bone is articulating with the femur bone, so the pubic bone is providing the cup shaped structure and the femur is having the ball shaped structure. Both are articulating together and providing the, making the joints together possible. Now we are going to discuss about the disorders of the joints. Till now we have studied about what is the joints, what are the different types of joint. So since it is also a structure which is present within our body, so there might be some kind of disorders may happen within the joint. So what are the different disorders that can form within the joints? Like there will be dislocation of the joints is possible. Since the joint where the two bones or more than two bones are articulating together and form a junction point, so there might be dislocation of the bones might happen. Like one bone is forced out of its position in respect with respect to the joints. So the articulating surface of both bones are not in relation to each other. So basically with these types of dislocation, when the dislocation of bone is taking place, the reduction is done by the experts only. So we should meet the doctors which is knowing about the joints, so that they can again place the bones in articulating to each other so that joints can function properly. Other type of disorders are sprain, which means the excessive stretch of an ligament. Ligament are the connective tissue which are joining the two bones together and keeping them in articulating to each other or in a single plane. So if that excessive stretch of that ligament is happening, which may cause sprain. The third type of disorders are arthritis. Basically arthritis is a condition in which inflammation of joints may be possible, or where the inflammation of joints is basically happening. It may be of two types. One is acute, which is usually bacterial in nature. So basically the microorganisms, bacteria is attacking the joints, so that joints, the inflammation of the joints is taking place. other may be chronic in nature. So basically the chronic joints are a type of delayed joints. The examples of chronic arthritis are rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis and gouty arthritis. Now we are going to summarize about the lecture whatever we have studied. So basically after completing this lecture we will be able to explain about the joints, its classification, the types of joints along on the basis of their classification along with their examples, as well as the disorders of the joints also. At last, we are going to talk about the references from where the contents has been taken from. We have taken the contents from the Handbook of General Anatomy, which is written by B.D. Chaurasia, as well as we have taken the some contents from Gray's Anatomy, which was written by the writers Peter L. Williams and Roger Warwick, as well as some contents has also been taken from the textbook of Human Anatomy, which is written by the writer T.S. Ranganathan. The pictures has been taken from the internet, which is basically from the Googles we have searched and taken the pictures.